What is the unborn? If it's true, as my pro-choice friends tell me all the time, Megan, an abortion is no different than clipping a fingernail or pulling a tooth. It's just a simple medical procedure, no harm, no foul. What's the big deal? If they are right, then I can go home, I can retire. But if the unborn are human, that's very different.
At the 2024 Coram Deo Student Worldview Conference that Maven put on in Fort Myers, Florida, we took testimonies and we paired them with training in the truth. And so one speaker would get up and share a testimony, and the other would then do some training and teaching on an area related to that testimony. One of the testimonies that was shared was my co-host and my beautiful wife, Erin. She shared her testimony about getting pregnant as a senior in high school and then becoming a single mom as a freshman in college. And that testimony really spoke to the value of human life. And then we had Megan Almon from Apologetics Inc. get up, and she did some training on the pro-life view. Now, Megan's training is very important, and it's not just important for the issue of abortion. It has much broader implications. And so we wanted to share Megan's very important talk at the student conference with you, really to help us think through the value of human life, and then how we can then pass that kind of Christian worldview on to our children and the next generation.
But let's get started and dive right in. There is no beating around the bush here. We are going to talk about the issue of abortion. And we're going to talk about it at this time and at this place and at your cultural moment. And we're going to walk right through the front door, because the fact of the matter is that this is an election year, and this issue will be at the epicenter of every controversial conversation that will happen in our polarized culture right now. There are ballot initiatives up state to state when it comes to this issue to try and protect human life, around 11 of them at the moment. And if something does not change, those will not pass. Roe versus Wade being overturned never was going to do away with abortion, but it was going to give people their voices back. And what we have learned through that was that our nation is not with us on the pro-life issue. So as we begin to talk about it, I want to just lay a few little ground rules before I dive into making a case for the pro-life view. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm a pro-life apologist. So we're going to do apologetics. And the wonderful thing about the art of apologetics is that it allows us to take an issue like abortion up into the abstract. If you think about sending a kite up into the air, it's a little bit like that. When we send it up there, we can look at it and we can watch it and we can see, does this make sense when we line it up with this? And if we look at it this way, so it's helpful in that way. But when we do apologetics with regard to these difficult issues, the thing that we can never ever forget, and I promise you I won't, is that the issues that we're talking about are tethered just like that kite. And in this case, these issues are tethered to real people. And there are two very true things that I know when it comes to the issue of abortion and talking about it and thinking about it all these years that I've been this close to the issue. And one of those things in this moment that we're forgetting is that this, like so many others, is not an us and them issue. This is an issue regarding ideas. And in fact, everyone I talk to, no matter where they stand on the issue of abortion, from the spectrum of the most extreme pro-choice person to the most extreme pro-life person, there are two things that we all have in common. And one of those is that abortion causes an immense amount of pain. It hurts people. The second thing that I know that I have in common with everyone I've talked to is that there's nobody talking about this issue who isn't doing it because they're not compassionate towards someone. The reason we get so heated over it is because it is driven by compassion. What we have to get to the bottom of are the ideas. So that's one thing I want us to understand diving into the issue. Another is that I'm going to ask you guys for an immense amount of grace over this next time that we have together. The reason for that is that I haven't met you guys, and so I don't know your stories. And I don't know where the ideas that we're going to talk about, like that kite, might intersect with your story. But in a room of this size, inevitably, I know that they will. So I'm going to ask you for grace as we navigate these things together. I won't forget about that tether. Third thing I want you to realize is that I know that not everybody in the room agrees with me on this issue. That would make it too easy. Our culture doesn't work that way. Some of you might not even know what you think about the issue. Some of you might disagree with me at the outset. My goal today is very modest. I'm not here to say, hey, you should be pro-life because I am. It's more like what Brett talked about last night. I'm pro-life because I think the pro-life view is true. So the work is on me today to make that case. I'm the one doing the heavy lifting, and all I would ask is that you hear me out and listen to the reasons that I give and compare them to your own view. See, that's how reasonable dialogue actually works. And if you were in my shoes, I hope I would give you that same respect and hear you out. When we do that, we actually make one another better because we're after what is true and what is real. So let's talk about abortion. But let's talk about it in a way that we're actually talking about abortion, because right now, when people start a conversation about abortion, they'll talk about everything but abortion. And in order to talk about it well, what we really have to do is dig down underneath it. We're gonna look at a few of the driving ideas behind the issue today, because when we dig down under an issue like this, we learn that what's really driving it are questions about what does it even mean to be human? And what does it even mean to be valuable as a human being? So to do that, I want to start with a story, because we find ourselves in the midst of a great true story, and it's the best stories out there that actually help us remember things that we didn't know we already knew were true. So we're going to do that, start with a story. The story I have in mind for you today is this one. I could have chosen any number of stories. We're going to go with a children's book. How many of you have read this book, or somebody's read it to you? You know what this book is. Max Lucado's You Are Special, a few of you. For those who haven't, that's fine. Here's the story. This book is about a people group called the Whims. Now, the Whims are little wooden puppet people. They live in a village. They have a very odd way of life. All day, every day, the Whims leave their little Whims houses and they watch one another go about their daily routine. And some of the Whims are incredibly talented. So you've got your Whims who are like the resident athletes. They can run fast and they can jump high and they can do all of the acrobatics, all the tricks. And the other Whims watch those Whims and they're impressed with them. Some of the Whims are beautiful to look at because their paint is shiny and new. Some of the Whims can speak well, or they can sing well, right? Like your Whim Adele's, I don't know, but those are those. And every Whim has in his or her possession a little box on their belt, and that box is full of stickers. So when these super talented Whims do the things that they're really good at, and they do them well, the other Whims go to the box and they pull out gold star stickers and they go and they stick them on to those Whims. Now, some of the other Whims are not as talented. Our main character is one of those. His name is Punchinello. Will you guys please just say that weird name with me? Punchinello. Yeah, I didn't come up with it. I feel like it's maybe Italian. Like if you do this, it can sound that way. I don't know. But Punchinello, he tries to run fast and he tries to do the acrobatics, but he's super clumsy. So he ends up falling down. And when he falls, he inevitably scratches up his paint. So he's a little dinged up. And when he tries to explain what happens, he gets really nervous and he trips over his words and doesn't come out right. And the other Whims look at Punchinello and they're like, wow, look at him. I mean, he's just not a very good Whim. And so Punchinello does not have a single gold star. On the contrary, he's covered in gray dot stickers. And when we find Punchinello at the beginning of the story, he doesn't want to go outside and be around the other Whims because he begins to believe what they say of him. He deems himself unworthy. And so he kind of hides out in his little Whim house, and we're going to leave him there for just a little while. There is more to the story. But I'm going to pause here Because in this little bitty children's book, there is a great big idea that we need to pay attention to. Punchinello lives in a society where some of his kind don't matter as much as others. Men and women, because that is what you are. There are not boys and girls here. There are young men and young women. We live in a society in which some human beings matter more than others. Some human beings matter more than others. Now, this is an idea, but rule number one of Christian apologetics is that ideas have consequences. The great philosopher, Leonardo DiCaprio, once said, in the film, I don't know if he's a philosopher, I've never had a conversation with him, but in the film Inception, his character said that an idea can be the most dangerous thing. And he got that right because ideas have consequences. We can take that a step further. Ideas have consequences. Dangerous ideas have victims. And the idea that some human beings matter more than others is a dangerous idea, and it has many victims. Doesn't take a lot to figure that out. We could do a brief glance at history and we can see how this idea has manifested in societies before our own. Like we can go as far back as Israel under Pharaoh, that was slavery. We can fast forward several generations to ancient Rome and we can see this idea manifesting in a number of heinous ways, really. The Romans did practice abortion. They also practiced exposure. If a child was born and was not wanted, that baby was left exposed to the elements, usually in the graveyards outside of the cities. It was the Christians in Rome who would go and find those babies and take them home and adopt them often. In Rome, fathers were allowed under Roman law to kill their adult children if they decided there was a reason enough to do that. And in the arenas, we know that Christians and many others were slaughtered for entertainment purposes. And the crowds begged for more. If you've ever seen the film Gladiator, you'll know what I'm talking about. We can fast forward into the slavery in our own nation, the European slave trade that came into the shores of America, still feeling many of the ramifications of that. We can look at the Holocaust, in which someone deemed an entire people group subhuman for arbitrary reasons, and millions lost their lives. We could keep going and going. But if I'm right about the issue of abortion, and I still have a case to make for that, then the idea that some human beings matter more than other human beings is manifesting right now, today, to the tune of around 2,000 human lives every single business day. That is a conservative estimate at best, and it's only for America, not other countries, not worldwide. If you take a look around this room just for a second, that number, the conservative estimate, because many states are not required to report their abortions each year, California being one, and over-the-counter and telemedicine abortions are on the rise, so we don't really have a handle on the numbers anymore. But 2,000 is this room about 4 times over every day. So if I'm right about the issue of abortion, that's what an idea is costing us. We must think about it, and we must think well about it. And why would we anchor a conference on this issue? Well, as Francis Schaeffer, the Christian thinker and writer from several decades ago, talked about abortion, he called it a cornerstone issue. The cornerstone was the stone at the top of the arch that held the whole structure intact and in place. And the reason he said that abortion is a cornerstone issue is because he knew that those ideas of what it means to be human and valuable were underneath it. And that if we remove that cornerstone, if we start to say that abortion is fine, if we make disposable the most vulnerable human beings among us, then the entire structure will crumble. Because who's to say that someone can't define you out of valuable humanity next? Ideas have consequences. Dangerous ideas have victims. And these ideas don't surprise us. The fact that that's where the battle takes place. Paul has been telling us this all along. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, where he's defending his own ministry, he talks about the kind of battle we're in. and the weapons that we have at our disposal. He says, though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh. We don't carry gladiator swords, but they are divinely powerful to destroy strongholds. I think what Paul's talking about is something like what we would call worldviews now. These things that have a hold of our mind are convincing us, these beliefs that we hold. If you don't believe me, he's talking about ideas. Keep going. We destroy arguments, ideas, and every lofty opinion, ideas, raised against the knowledge of God. We take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. 1 Peter 3:15 and 16 tells us how we do that. Brett brought that verse up last night. We are to do it with gentleness and respect, following the example of our great Savior. So in a culture like this one, those ideas come back to a couple of key things. One is the nature of truth itself. Go back to what Brett talked about last night with the subjective and objective. Abortion in our nation has been framed as a subjective issue. That is an issue that's all about personal preference, which is why when you have a conversation with someone on abortion, you'll often hear that, oh, well, I would never have one, but we can't tell other women what they can and can't do with their bodies. Well, I think it's wrong, Megan, but that's my truth. I can't force that on other people. Abortion is often framed this way. Or after the overturn of Roe v. Wade, this meme started making its circulation again. It used to be a bumper sticker, now it's a meme. If you don't like abortion, don't have one. Problem solved. There, wasn't that easy? Notice the word like. It takes an objective moral issue and tries to twist it into a matter of preference, and it's not that kind of issue. Moral issues are not subjective. Imagine if that meme read something like this. Oh, you don't like slavery, don't own one. Problem solved. We're a little clearer on that one, but not fully. So truth is at the heart of this, but so is that question about human value. What is it that makes you valuable as a human being? What is it that gives you rights that other people are obligated to respect? What if someone wanted to strip you of your most basic rights? What is the thing that you would appeal to say, you can't do that because of this? What is this? Christians in the room. I'm often asked, what does abortion have to do with the gospel? Why do you talk about this issue? Men and women, how in the world are you going to share a gospel message with a world that has forgotten what it even means to be human and valuable? Epicenter. It's at the heart of it. So how do we achieve clarity? Well, in our time together, we're going to do three things. First, we're going to simplify this issue when it comes to talking about it in conversation. Please do not hear me saying, oh, this is a simple issue. That is not what I'm saying. There are many complex things that bump into the issue of abortion. It is complex psychologically, no doubt. It is complex economically. It is complex socially. It is complex politically, God knows. All of those things, but morally speaking, it's actually very simple. If we're actually talking about abortion and not all the other things, it becomes very simple. There's one question at the center of the debate that nobody's talking about. So we're going to learn to bring the conversation back to that question, the very heart. Second thing is we're going to answer the question in a way that may surprise some people. And the final thing is we're going to make a case for why you matter, just like your unborn neighbors. So my hope is that though this is heavy stuff, that you will leave today feeling encouraged by the truth of this message. All right, simplifying the issue. Meet my daughter. This is Neely. She is 18 years old. Neely, and when we had Neely and Rogan, my son is Rogan, we lived in Georgia at the time. So we only moved to Colorado about 6 years ago. We lived in a log cabin in the woods in Georgia. I used to sign my letters to people from the cabin in the woods, and then they made the horror film, Cabin in the Woods. I didn't know what to do at that point. It was very disappointing. And then they made a horror film called Megan, and now I don't know how to sign my letters. Like, it's very disturbing. But we lived in a beautiful cabin in the woods. And one day, my best friend Courtney came to visit me with her 3 boys. Now, her oldest boy, Micah, was Neely's best friend at the time. So Courtney and I were gonna do what moms do. We were gonna sit down, visit, and drink the elixir of life that is coffee. That is an objectively true statement, because that's what you do, all right? And then the kids were gonna play outside. Now, it was a beautiful day. We don't live near the road at the cabin in the woods. It was back in the woods. So we took the kids outside. We're like, go have fun. But we're not bad parents. We left the door open. So we could not see my kids or her kids, but we could hear everything that was going on. That's important to this story. Now, I get one sip into the coffee when I hear the sound that every parent dreads, blood-curdling screaming coming from the general direction of my backyard. The scream was distinctly female. There's only one girl out there, mine. So I did what any good parent would do. I dropped the coffee. Now, the spoiler alert is that is the most tragic part of this story. So everybody can just take a breath, right? But I didn't know that at the time. I dropped the coffee, I'm hearing the screaming, I'm running for the back door in a space of what feels like an eternity because obviously something tremendously awful is going on. I can't see my daughter yet, but I'm running and I'm hearing her say these words, "Get it off me, get it off me, just kill it." Now, I'm mid-lunge and I'm thinking one thing. What do you think I'm thinking? Kill what? Right? What is on you, child? Because let's just go through what my mind went through. If this is on my daughter, I will help her kill it. I don't do creepy crawly things. I don't do things that sting, right? Like insects, like this is not even an insect, right? Arachnid, I know, homeschool mom, we got this. This is hideous. I'm gonna help her kill that thing. If you have a problem with that, maybe it's my intuition. We can talk about that later. Is it our dog? Now, Gus is an Australian cattle dog. He's called a blue heeler. Do you know why they're called that? If you run across my backyard, my dog is gonna think you're a cow, and he's gonna come and bite your heels to try and round you up. That's what they do. So if Gus is attacking my daughter, I'm not gonna kill Gus. I'm gonna put him back in the house, right? Is it her brother? I don't know what a normal Tuesday night looks like at your house. This is my house. Right? It's impressive. It's impressive. I wish he was here so he could hear from you guys. No, the point is the answer to what is it actually matters. For those who are dying to know, it was a lizard. Micah was holding a little green lizard. Neely wanted to hold it, so he hands it to her, and it slipped out of her like fist, and it went up her shirt sleeve. So it was like crawling around inside of her clothing. Now, the lizard no animals were harmed in the making of this example. It fell to the ground, it slithered away to safety, everybody was fine, okay? I digress. The answer to what is it actually matters. We're here to ask the question, can we kill the unborn? I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm gonna say, well, sure. If the unborn are not human beings. Before we can answer the question, can I kill the unborn, we have to ask a prior question. What is it? What is the unborn? If it's true, as my pro-choice friends tell me all the time, Megan, an abortion is no different than clipping a fingernail or pulling a tooth. It's just a simple medical procedure, no harm, no foul. What's the big deal? If they are right, then I can go home, I can retire. But if the unborn are human, that's very different. The problem is that most people skip over this question, what is the unborn? And they'll go ahead and give reasons or justifications for why abortion should be allowed. Reasons and justifications, by the way, that deal with very important things. That's why this issue is so hard. You'll hear abortion is an issue of privacy. That was the legal justification under Roe versus Wade. It was an appeal to privacy. That's what the Supreme Court found there was no grounding to in the Constitution. But some will say abortion is an issue of privacy. It's a private matter between a woman and her doctor, between a woman and her little g God. Who are you to say what somebody can do or not do in the privacy of their bedroom or sex life at home? Some will say abortion is an issue of poverty. This woman cannot afford to feed another child. Why would you force her to go through with the pregnancy? They'll talk about women and their educational opportunities. She didn't mean to get pregnant. What, are you gonna tell her she can't go to college? She can't pursue that career? She can't pursue her dreams? She didn't intend this. They'll tell you that abortion is something that helps with the problem of unwanted children. Why would you want someone to have a baby that nobody wants, that nobody will really love the way they're supposed to? Abortion helps with the problem of children who might be born and then suffer, children with disabilities. We don't want them to suffer. That's that compassion piece coming in. You'll hear, if some of these states go and make abortion illegal, women are going to die pursuing these back alley illegal abortions, or at the very least, they'll be harmed. Why would you want that on your plate, on your record? If abortion is made illegal in some of these states, then wouldn't that be forcing religion on other people? That's a problem. We can't do that, can we? Not easy things. And as heavy as those things are, and as serious as each of those things is, as much as each one deserves a good conversation, every single one of those justifications made the same mistake with regard to what we're talking about right now, because they all assumed something at the outset. Namely, they assumed that the unborn is not human. Here's how I know that. If my nephew AJ were here right now, I shamelessly put him in this sweatshirt. It was a risk coming to Florida. Thank you. I got one friend in the house. All right. If AJ were standing in front of you, you would all agree on a few things. First of all, obviously, he's adorable. He's crazy. Hello, toddler boy. Some of you have been toddler boys. I know that you know what I'm talking about. But he is unquestionably human, yes? We're in agreement. Good deal. What if I were to read that same list of justifications back to you and tell you these are reasons why I ought to be allowed to kill AJ? You would think I'd lost my mind. You'd be like, somebody take her away right now. She's dangerous. And you'd be right. Because see, we don't kill toddlers in the name of privacy. And we don't kill toddlers when they get expensive. We don't kill teenagers when they get expensive either. This is very good news for you guys. We don't kill toddlers when they stand in the way of something that we want, our education, our career, our dreams. We don't kill toddlers when they're unwanted. We help them. There are orphanages around the world full of seemingly unwanted children. I think the unwanted part is arguable. We don't kill toddlers when they're disabled. We have no problem with laws that make it harder for people to kill toddlers in case they might be harmed in the act of trying. And it is no more religious to say that AJ has value and cannot be killed than to say that he doesn't. Everyone is doing religion in that way. That's a metaphysical conversation. Whenever somebody makes a justification for why abortion should be okay, you should ask yourself, if we were talking about a toddler, would this justification fly? And if the answer is no, then you can know that they're assuming that the unborn is not human. They're assuming the answer to this question, what is the unborn, is that it's something else, but not a human being. The first thing you have to do is keep the main thing the main thing. In thinking about this issue and talking about this issue, bring it back to that question. You can even use a toddler as an example. If we take the issue of poverty, this woman can't afford to feed another child. Even if they're talking about someone in particular, put your hand out to the side for a concrete example and ask them, if I had a 2-year-old standing right here next to me, right here. A few weeks ago, her dad lost his job, and now the family is really struggling to make ends meet. They can't afford to feed all the kids, so they've reached an agreement. They're gonna kill their toddler to just lessen that financial burden a little bit. Should they be allowed to do that? So that person's gonna look at you like you're nuts. I promise they will. But they'll say, no, that's stupid. No, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No, what are you getting at? Whatever they say, ask them, why not? What comes next will be something like, the toddler is obviously human. The toddler is already a person. The toddler has rights, or, Megan, that's completely different. No matter what they say, I'm exactly where I want to be in that conversation. Is it different? I'll ask. I want to know, is the unborn human like the toddler is human? Can we talk about that first? Then we can talk about poverty, because it deserves a conversation. Or perhaps we can talk about how we can better help the individual you're referring to, if it's someone in particular. Go to that toddler. Get back to the question. But now we're in part two of our presentation here. How do we answer that question, what is the unborn? Because we got to provide an answer if we pose the question. That's only fair. The problem is that most people assume that this question is an inherently religious question. And it's not. It's not a religious question at all. I don't go to my Bible to find the answer to what is the unborn. Where would I go? I hear whispering, tentative whispering, but lots of science. Yeah, you would go to science. This is a scientific question. If Jesus is the person of truth, God is the God of all that is true. He's the God of science also. I'm totally fine with this. Let's go to science. There's an entire branch of science dedicated to answering this question. Biology isn't even specific enough. That's the study of life. The science of embryology. Embryology, if we go to it, here's a quote from one textbook. There are many textbooks. They all say basically the same thing. This one says, a zygote is the beginning of a new human being. Human development. That's what begins at fertilization. And then they describe the process during which the sperm meets the egg and unite to form this single specialized cell called a zygote. Now, this highly specialized, totipotent, that's just a scientific word that means that all of the parts of it have been undifferentiated yet. They're going to be assigned to become different parts of this particular human being as this human being develops. But it marks the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. Science has been clear for a very long time that from the moment of conception, you and I were human beings. But the pro-life camp is not the only one that would acknowledge this scientific truth. Warren Hearn is an abortion doctor. He works in Boulder, Colorado, so not very far from my home. Colorado is one of the few states in America right now where you can go and receive a late-term abortion that is up to birth. And Warren Hearn is one of the doctors who performs those abortions. And at a Planned Parenthood conference, Dr. Hearn was talking to a group of abortionists and teaching them how to perform this particular procedure, this dilation and evacuation procedure. He said, we have reached a point in this particular technology where there is no possibility of denying that this is an act of destruction. It is before one's eyes. The sensations of dismemberment flow through the forceps like an electric current. Camille Paglia, well-known feminist writer, one whose work I will read. I respect her. She's honest. I don't agree with her. She wrote this in Salon magazine a few years ago. I've always frankly admitted that abortion is murder. Murder is not always the word I would use. Interestingly enough, murder implies a particular kind of intent. I don't always know the intent because the ideas are so convoluted out there. But Camille uses the word murder. She calls it the extermination of the powerless by the powerful. Liberals, she's talking about her camp, for the most part, have shrunk from facing the ethical consequences of their embrace of abortion, which results in the annihilation of concrete individuals, not just clumps of insensate tissue. Camille Paglia can be read elsewhere saying that she will not call herself pro-choice. She thinks that that term is a cowardly euphemism, her words. She is pro-abortion. She says the pro-life camp has the moral high road and that her view is one of convenience, and that others who agree with her on the issue should adopt the same kind of thinking. So back to the embryology. Let's break it down so we understand the answer to the question, what is the unborn? What that big long quote said essentially, and if you keep reading in those textbooks, and I invite you to do so, is that from the moment of conception, when fertilization happened, you and I were living, distinct, whole human beings. We know that we were living. We fit the definition of an organism that you learned in, 7th grade life science? You underwent cellular reproduction. You're still doing that. That means you grow. You metabolize because you turn food into energy. Respond to stimulus. Embryos in lab studies have even been shown to be excellent at repairing wounds. It's just like when you get a scratch on your arm or your leg and your body repairs itself. Embryos do that too. They're alive. They're also distinct. The unborn is not part of the woman's body. Not like my arm is part of my body. When you were in your mother's womb, you were attached to your mother. That part's true, but you were not part of her body. See, you had your own unique genetic code from the moment that you came into existence, and that genetic code differed from your mother's and from your father's. If you'll allow me just for a second to get kind of technical, because this is just so cool. Like, science is so cool. Dr. Maureen Kondik is a neurobiologist, so she studies the biology of the brain and whatnot at the University of Utah. Brilliant woman. And she's often asked about these types of things because of the type of work that she does and because she is pro-life. And Dr. Kondik is often asked the question, Dr. Kondik, how do you know when one type of cell becomes something else? Like when one type of cell changes into another type of cell, how do you know when that has happened? She said, oh, that's easy. Across the field of biology, we all agree that if one of two things happens, you have a brand new cell. Either the cell changes and the stuff that it's made up of, that's its material composition, if that changes, you have a new cell. Or if it changes the way that it behaves, you have a new cell. She's then asked a follow-up question. Dr. Kondik, can we know when human life begins? Her answer is yes. See, the moment that sperm and egg meet, within about 250 milliseconds, the plasma membranes of those two cells begin to merge together to form a hybrid cell surface, meaning that that egg cell changes in its material composition, the stuff that makes it up, faster than you can blink your eyes. That egg cell goes from being an egg cell that could have survived about 24 hours in its environment to being a new kind of cell that can now survive, 100 years or more, given medical technology, because it's a brand new human being. Within about 3 to 5 minutes, it meets the second criterion, which is not even necessary. It changes its behavior. It goes from being an egg cell whose sole job was to attract sperm to being something else that repels them like the Death Star. Changes behavior, new cell. But it had already met the requirement in 250 milliseconds. That's incredible. So you are living. We're a distinct human being, and you are also a whole human being. Now this one sounds a little crazy, so stay with me on this one. Everybody do me a favor really quickly. Raise one hand up. Just make sure you're still with me. It's that time of day, I know. Good, turn it around. Bring it lower. Take your other hand, gently, adverbs are important, scratch the back of that hand. I am not liable if you scratch too hard. Good, brush it off. Good, we're done. That was weird. You guys are so trusting, right? I had a point. All of us, just successfully scratched hundreds of skin cells from the backs of our hands. Hundreds of them. Now, because it was your outer layer of skin, most of them were already dead. But some of those cells that are now on your lap are still alive, and they're going to die in just a minute, all because of you. Every single one of them. I know you guys are brushing your, oh my God, you do this all day long. You shed cells all day long, it's fine. All of those cells contain your DNA encoding, but no one in the room is guilty of mass murder. Whew. Yeah, see, those cells are part of you. They have a particular job. They communicate with all of your other parts so that you, the organism, function as a whole coordinated organism. The embryo is different in kind from any other single cell, that zygote, that single-celled embryo. Because I'll often hear well, Megan, skin cells are alive. Sperm is alive. Egg is alive. What's the big deal? See, those cells, though, skin cells, sperm cells, egg cells, also are part of a larger organism with a specific role with regard to the organism. The embryo, even at the single-celled stage, its parts contribute to its overall function, and it goes on to do something that is absolutely mind-blowing. See, you didn't come into existence over a period of time. You're the kind of thing, there's a whole philosophical conversation we could go into about this. You're the kind of thing that came into existence all at once. And everything that makes you you was already there at that moment. And you've gone on to do something remarkable since then, which leads me to another distinction. The difference between something that is constructed and something that is developed. Like I said, you didn't come into being one piece at a time. But our culture would love for you to think about yourself that way, which is why when we're talking to people about the issue of abortion, we'll often hear things like, well, it's just a clump of cells. It's just a mass of tissue. As if you could add some more parts and then the end product would be a baby. But that's not how it works, you guys. Think about how we use the terminology in our culture. Ideas have consequences, dangerous ideas have victims. My grandmother would have talked about baby making. She would have used that good old-fashioned word procreation. It's a great word, we should bring that back. My generation, your generation, exclusively uses the term reproduction, which is a factory term. No wonder we think about the unborn as constructed things. No wonder we think about ourselves as constructed things. You guys know you're more than just your body, right? Like if you lost a limb in an accident, God forbid, but hypothetically, like if you were like Bethany Hamilton, right? The tiger shark and the whole thing. She lost her arm. Did her friends and family come to the hospital to visit 3/4 of Bethany? Or did they go to visit Bethany? There's more to you than just your body, you guys. Because you're the kind of thing that came into existence all at once. You have something that grounds your identity through time and through change. You were not constructed at all. From the moment you came into being, you have driven your own development from within. And you're still doing that right now. That's remarkable. Richard Stith is a philosopher who helps us understand this a little bit better with this great analogy. He talks about a Polaroid camera. Please nod your heads if you know what this is, and I don't have to talk about it like it's an artifact. Praise God. And they're coming back. You guys have the new ones? Anybody have the new ones? Super cute. Fujifilm makes them too, the whole like instant camera. Okay. He says, imagine you are in the jungle, you're in the Amazon, taking pictures of the scenery, and you're using this, just go with it, and you go to snap a photo of what's in front of you, and as you hit the button, this guy leaps across the path, and you have captured the image. Now, I am an expert on black jaguars because I watch Wildcats with my children. Right? It's awesome. What I do know about them is that they are very rare. There's not many of them in the wild, so there aren't many photos of black jaguars. So if you caught that image, you are holding something with that tab of extreme value, like National Geographic will pay money for that. But Richard Stith says, imagine you're holding it and you're waiting the required, 90 seconds until it emerges. And someone comes and they see what you're holding and they look over your shoulder and they just take it out of your hands and they rip it in two and they toss it down. You say, what are you doing? I say, what's the big deal? It was just a brown smudge. You say, no, it wasn't. I was holding a photograph of a jaguar. It was rare, it was beautiful, it was valuable. It was already there. You just couldn't see it yet because it was doing what? Developing, just like you and I did. Science is clear on the answer, what is the unborn. From the moment you came into existence, you and I were living, distinct, whole human beings. And we wish we could stop there with our conversation, but sometimes you talk about it and you'll make your scientific case. And it's like it didn't make an impact at all. What do you do then when your words are not enough? Sometimes, you guys, I think what we have to do is show them. We have to show them. There is something about reading about the Holocaust in a textbook. We just did that with my kids. But it's altogether different if you visit Auschwitz or you go to one of the museums and you see with your eyes the photographs, the videos, the well of shoes, a well of shoes, not just a floor covered with them, of the victims. It's one thing to read about D-Day in a history book. It's another thing to watch the opening scenes of Saving Private Ryan. I was a journalist before I did this work. I had the privilege of interviewing World War II vets before we lost many of them, and met some of the ones who were in the first wave that day. And they tell me that the opening scenes of that film are strikingly accurate from their own experience. You watch that film, it'll change you. It's one thing to talk about abortion in a country that is so good at hiding death away, obsessively hiding it away. It's another thing to see it. In just a moment, I'm going to play a very short video clip. Now, hear what's going to happen here, because I'm going to take a minute to set this up. Here's what you will see if you choose to look at it. You will see the victims of abortion. It will show images of aborted fetuses from the first, second, and third trimester, because in our country, there are states that allow abortion up to birth. There is no abortion procedure being performed, and there is no narration in the video clip. In fact, there's music that plays. And the reason that music is there is that if this is something that you know that you do not want to look at today, I totally get it. And I invite you for that 1 minute while the music plays to simply look down. No one around you will know what choice you made about the video, so you don't have to feel embarrassed or pressured in any way. I'm just letting you know you do not have to see it. And mamas and dads in the room, or leaders with young kids who are here, just know that in the next 3 minutes or so, we'll hit play and you guys can know what to do with your kiddos. So before I even play this video clip, I want to talk about the most important part of my presentation today, and it is this. If Christianity is objectively true, and I think that it is, it's the only reason to be a Christian, like Brett said, that means its gospel is objectively true. And what that tells me is that Jesus came to live among us, lived the life that we couldn't, and then laid down his own life on our behalf. Now that does something to the room. It does something to all of us. It levels the playing field. Because what that tells me is there can't be an us and them on any of these issues, just like Monique was talking about. There can't be. There's only human beings. And prior to the work of Jesus, there were only fallen human beings. And God in his goodness and his justice could have done away with us all, and he would still be good and just. That's a hard truth. But he didn't do that. He sent someone to rescue us. Did you know the arguments for the resurrection of Christ being the actual thing that happened that day in history are far better than any other explanation that has ever been given? Whether you're talking scientifically, historically, philosophically, medically, doesn't matter. That tells me that Jesus came and he died. And it wasn't enough for him to defeat Rome. That's what everybody thought he was going to do. No. He was after bigger enemies. He conquered sin and death. When he rose from the grave, he made a mockery of sin and death, you guys, a joke of them. Which means that in a world that's telling you, shh, don't talk about abortion. Shh. That's the issue. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. We'll call it reproductive freedom. We'll call it women's rights, but let's not call it what it is. It tells me that all the women that I've met who have held that secret within them, like Aaron talked about, for decades or weeks or days, who come forward because somebody had the courage to say the word, and it gave them courage to come forward and say, this is what happened. But it isn't just for those who've had a brush with abortion, which can be both women and men, guys who pressure a girl or pay for abortions. This message is for everybody because we all need that saving grace. We all need the same thing. There is real healing and hope when it comes to this issue. And the only way people can't get to that kind of healing is if we don't talk about it. So if you choose to watch the clip, please watch it through the lens of an objectively true gospel. Here it goes. Hundreds of times I've seen that video and I make myself look at it and it never gets easier. The first time I saw it, I was the person in the room who wanted to know why it was necessary. I was already pro-life. Why would I have to watch that? And the man who trained me to talk about this issue, one of the best men I know, Scott Klusendorf, president and founder of Life Training Institute, he didn't make an argument. He told me a story. The story was about this young man. This is Emmett Till. This picture was taken in 1955. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old young black man who lived in Chicago, Illinois with his mother, Mamie. And one summer, she sent him by train to visit his cousins in Money, Mississippi. Before he left, she gave him a ring that had his dad's initials inscribed on the ring, and he put that ring on, the gift, and he got on the train and he went south, and he met up with his cousins and he started talking about life in Chicago, which in 1955, newsflash, was very different than Money, Mississippi. Emmett was talking about the girls he'd been on dates with. He had photographs in his wallet of 2 young women. Both of them were white. And his cousins didn't believe him. So on a dare, Emmett walked into Bryant grocery store in Money, Mississippi. He bought a piece of bubble gum. And what happened next is not really clear. He might have said something mildly flirtatious to the clerk. He might have whistled at her, or she made this part up. Whatever happened, 2 nights later, that woman's husband and another man, his brother, I believe it was, went to Emmett's uncle's house and dragged Emmett from his bed, put him in the back of their car, kidnapping him, drove him to the outskirts of the city where they proceeded to beat him, torture him, and murder him. Emmett Till was shot at close range with a shotgun. His body was tied to a cotton gin fan, which is a very large piece of metal equipment with barbed wire, and he was thrown into the river. 2 days later, after some heavy rain had passed through the area, some boys were fishing downstream from where the incident had happened. They saw something in the water. They went to investigate, and they found Emmett. Now, he was unrecognizable by this time, but he still had that ring on. And once law enforcement officials had identified his body, they put him in a wooden box, nailed the lid shut, and sent him home to his mother by train. When Mamie Till got that makeshift casket, she demanded publicly that they hold an open casket funeral for her son. Now, people thought she'd lost her mind in her grief. They thought she'd gone crazy. Don't you know what that would cause? Don't you know the climate of the culture? Don't you know what people would say? Emmett Till stood her ground and she said, yes, I know, but I want the whole world to see what they did to my boy. Emmett Till did have an open casket funeral, and thousands of people walked in front of his body. You can find images online. They're black and white photos. They are gruesome. Those photos were published in several publications. Jet magazine was only one that ran the photos. And when Rosa Parks, nod your head if you know that name, and if you don't, the minute this is over, you look her name up and read her story. When Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus, somebody asked that tiny, little, courageous, strong woman, what gave you the courage to go through with that? Do you know what she said? I couldn't get that boy's image out of my mind. See, Rosa Parks already agreed that what was happening was not okay. She knew that change needed to happen. And she saw Emmett Till's open casket, and that's the day that she said, enough. No more of this. Literally would not stand for it anymore. It was a catalyst for the civil rights movement, needed change in our country. And all I'm asking you is to join me in graciously, truthfully, opening the casket on this human rights issue. Because if we don't, men and women, I promise you that our nation will continue to tolerate a Holocaust, and it will never have to look at it. You might get to this point in the conversation with someone, and they'll say, Megan, I know what the science says. I get that it's human, but it's not a person yet. Human, but not a person yet. And what they're implying here is that there are some humans who are merely human, but there are other humans who have reached this special status that we call personhood or rights-bearing humanity. In other words, now we've come full circle, some human beings matter more than other human beings. Which brings us to our final question. What is it that makes us valuable? Now, this is not a scientific question. This is a philosophical question. So we'll go to philosophy to answer it. Turns out, philosophically, there are only two avenues of answers to this question. You might be valuable like an instrument, that is, that you perform in a certain way. You function in a way that has a particular outcome. Instrumental answers to this question all look like that. Or you might be intrinsically valuable. This is one that most people overlook because it's so simple. It just means you're valuable in light of the kind of thing you are. That's it. Instrumental or intrinsic. Stephen Schwartz is a philosopher who said, the intrinsic view is the only one that can make any sense at all. He said, as a matter of fact, there are no morally relevant differences between the embryos we all once were and the adults we are today. None of them would have made it okay for us to have killed you back then, but not now. He said there's really only 4 areas of difference you can point out between embryos and us. All of them are instrumental differences, but here's what they look like, and here's a great acronym for you to remember. SLED. S is size. The unborn are tiny. Therefore, they're insignificant. That's what the argument would say. L, level of development. They're less developed than we are. E deals with environment. That is particularly dealing with your location. And D is degree of dependency, or just remember that word, dependency. The unborn are more dependent on their mothers for survival. Schwartz said these don't work to say you could have been killed then, but not now. Let me point out why. Let's look at size first. The unborn are smaller than the dot at the end of a sentence when they're a zygote. Therefore, insignificant. But that can't work. If size is the thing that would make you valuable as a human being, we have a real problem. See, we could play a game in this room called Let's All Stand Up. And we'll see very quickly how this goes. When we ground our value in something arbitrary and external like size, we create a value spectrum. And on that spectrum, smaller humans matter less than larger ones. I was a gymnast, so I'm out. NBA players would rule the world on this view. This is how it works. Level of development, the unborn are less developed than we are. That's true as well. My son is 11 years old. He is less developed than every man in this room. I can't kill Rogan because he's less developed than that. Oh, but see, that's how logic works. If it's level of development that makes you valuable, then less developed humans are less valuable than more developed ones, which means toddlers, following the logical reasoning, are less developed and less valuable than children, are less developed and less valuable than teens, than adults, so on and so forth. The Ellen sled has all kinds of really fancy things on university campuses people like to talk about, things like consciousness, things like sentience, level of development. If somebody says, well, they're not sentient, therefore they're not persons, you can ask 2 questions. Number 1, what is so value-giving about sentience to begin with? Why is it that and not something else? Number 2, says who? You? Grounding questions. The E, where we're located, has nothing to do with your value. You didn't become something else because you walked into the sanctuary. The difference of in the womb to out of the womb is a journey of less than 10 inches in geographical location. That does not make a non-human, non-valuable entity into a valuable entity. If it does, then be careful, because we can reverse that reasoning and define you out of human value or valuable humanity if you scooch to the next seat. And degree of dependency, the unborn are dependent on their mothers for survival. That's true also. My mom is diabetic. And without the medicine she takes to help her body do what it cannot do on its own, she won't survive very long. I can't kill my mom because of her dependency. But if we're going to grant it for these humans, logic demands consistency, and we create value spectrums once again. The problem with instrumental answers is that they come to all of us in varying degrees. Any instrumental answer or functional answer to that question, why are we valuable, is going to result in a society of gross injustice every single time. The only answer that makes sense is that you were intrinsically valuable, you guys. Simple, but true. You're valuable because you are human. Now, I haven't gone to my Bible to make any of the case for life that I've made thus far. But what I've talked about can be found grounded there on page 1 when it talks about the Imago Dei. The moment that you came into existence, you were endowed with an unspeakable worth that your Maker gave you. No one can take that from you, and you can't give it away. So if you find yourself falling into the lies of the world around you, believing that you matter because of functional reasons, let me just tell you, it's a lie. Your ultimate worth has already been established. And it's the ones who understand that who are able to make a stand. Let's get back to end our story, and we'll end with this. Punchinello was hiding in his house until he noticed Lucia, another Wemmick. And what he noticed about Lucia is that she didn't have any stickers. So he started watching her, and he noticed that the other Wemmicks, some liked her because she was different. And so they would put gold stars on her, but the stars would fall off. And other people didn't like her, other Wemmicks, and so they would go to put gray dots on her, and the dots would fall off. And Punchinello had to know. So he went to her, he said, why don't the stickers stick to you, Lucia? She said, that's easy. I visit Eli every single day. Now, Eli was the woodworker who worked at the top of the hill. So Punchinello got really interested and curious and brave. And he walked to the top of the great big hill, and he opened the heavy wooden door, and he heard this booming voice. And we know it had to be Morgan Freeman's voice, because that's what God sounds like, pretty sure. And he said, hello, Punchinello. And Punchinello said, wait, you know my name? And Eli said, of course I know your name, I made you. And Punchinello said, I want to know why Lucia doesn't have any stickers. Eli said, oh, Punchinello, I've been waiting for you to ask me that question. See, she's decided that what I think is more important than what they think. The stickers only stick if they matter to you, Punchinello. And the more you trust me, the less the stickers matter. The best part of this story is that when Punchinello left Eli's workshop, he didn't fully understand. Not all the way, but he began to understand. So one of his stickers fell off. And he thought to himself, I think he really meant it. I think it might be true. Men and women, if you take nothing else today away, then take that gospel message that tells you that no matter what stickers the world puts on you, it cannot define your value. That has already been established. And it's the ones who understand that who become very dangerous to this world in the best possible way, because they're the ones who are able to speak to the truths about their unborn neighbors who cannot speak for themselves, but also the truths about the people sitting around them who don't understand the weight of the stickers they bear and cannot shake. I pray that you guys would be men and women of courage.
Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.